Nat, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tom. How are you for Monday?
Very good. Doing really well today. I've spent the morning with my son. My wife and I are juggling him. So kind of a nice, I went to a play center. So that was kind of a bit of a weird way to start the week off, because normally it's like, oh, I've got to get everything in order. But no, straight to a play center. So I've been climbing around feeling pretty rejuvenated. What about you?
Oh, yeah, look, it's been an interesting Monday, to be honest. But yesterday, actually, because it was such a cracking day in Melbourne, as for all the Melbourne people listening out there, and we decided to do an ocean swim yesterday, and it was actually ended up being 7 degrees in the bay yesterday.
Ooh.
So we stood there for 22 minutes, and then we were able to thaw out. But it's really interesting you say with your Monday morning about laughter, I suppose, and mine. Of really changing that oxygen and that breathing difference really there is pretty much what we're going to be talking about today about the vagus nerve.
Exactly. Yeah, that swim sounds super fresh. I've been getting in the water a little bit last week. I went for a couple, and it was 10 degrees, and I was struggling with that. So I have no idea how you did 20 something minutes in the bay. That's super impressive. Nat, but you're right. We are going to be talking about how we can support the vagus nerve function for optimal mental health, and for you listening, if you are wondering what the hell the vagus nerve is, because you're not a scientist, that's what Nat's here for. So, Nat, a really obvious question might be a bit of a too obvious, but what the hell is the vagus nerve? I do remember learning about it at some point at uni, but I couldn't tell you what's going on with that now. So, yeah, what's your synopsis of this? And if you can give it to us in layman's terms, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, of course, Tom. Look, vagus nerve is actually the longest nerve in the body. It's also known as a self-care nerve. So what the vagus nerve does, it connects your brain to many important organs throughout the body, which include your gut, your heart, and your lungs. So essentially, it takes readings from each of this and passes the messages from the brain. I like to look at it like a bit like a neural superhighway. And
Mm.
the word vagus actually means wanderer in Latin. So, what that is trying to represent is that it wanders all over the body and it reaches various organs here. It also plays a really key part in our parasympathetic nervous system, or our rest and digest nervous system. And this nervous system, or the PNS, that actually influences our breathing, our digestive function, and our heart rate, all of which actually have a huge impact also on our mental health. Hope that was
Mm.
simple.
That was super simple. Thank you for that. And it sounds like it's obviously a fairly long one, given how it goes, from your brainstem down. I do remember it being is it a cranial nerve as well? So it's sort of to do with your
I think so.
cranial.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's obviously touching a few different areas, and you mentioned the digestive tract there, and a lot of us have heard about or the word gut health, or the phrase gut health, and sometimes within that we're talking about, often with that there's a part of it which is about your mental health. So it's
Mm.
this is really showing how interconnected this thing is. But why is it important for your mental health?
Yeah. It's and I'm trying to again simplify this as much as possible,
Mm.
but you've got your automatic nervous system, and that actually comprises of three different areas. So you've got your sympathetic nervous system, you've got your just endocrinal, or ENS, I like to call it, that nervous system, and you've also got the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the PNS. The vagus nerve is probably more focused on that PNS, but the sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight response. So that's what gets us prepared to get us out of that threatened situation, and then starts to pump that adrenaline and the cortisol. But what people need to understand as well is that when that fight or flight system's on, it's got to gain the energy and the blood and the oxygen from other different areas, and more or not, then it takes it from that ENS area, and that's what helps our oxygens, our lungs, our intestines, our liver, our kidneys, all that kind of functioning. And what it's really does, it's supposed to take it away momentarily. So we gain that when we find ourselves in those threatened situation and our SNS is activated. It steals essentially for our body to get faster, to make ourselves, dare I say, vomit, to get ourselves lighter, to run away, or to give us that adrenal response to be able to fight ourselves out of a situation. That is where it takes it away, right? We obviously only want to be doing that for a really short amount of time, because those organs are obviously vital to our overall health and well-being. And this is where we want to actually have very quick, sharp messages to our parasympathetic nervous system, to be able to deactivate our sympathetic nervous system, and then reduce that adrenal response, reduce the cortisol response, and then provide those nutrients in the blood back to the ENS and the organs that they look after there. That is called, so the vagus nerve is very much being able to be responsible for that. But then it's like the vagus tone, right? Or the vagal tone. So the vagal tone is all about the speed of that change. So having a higher vagal tone means our body can relax faster after they find ourselves in those stressful and threatening situations. The reason why we don't want to be in there too long is that that's where the link between stress and the physical issues actually lie, like the chronic inflammation, those raised stress levels, and the cardiovascular problems, among other things that we can find ourselves when we're in that stress state for too long. So to get our bodies back into that rest and digest quickly, we want to be able to have a better vagal tone, which I know we're going to talk about in a minute, and how we can do that. But that's also then the link between that physical and mental health component as well, and that connection also then to the gut-brain axis.
Yeah, that's a great explanation. It's quite complicated, but if you're breaking it down into those three different systems and how I really like the kind of that concept of or the example of sort of poor gut health, and then looking at all the ways that can be resolved. It's not just often it's not just eat a different food or you're sensitive to all the different foods. There's a whole physiological response behind that, and sometimes when you go deeper into the history of people, what's going on in their lives, there's a chronic stress sort of part to it, which is creating some of those problems, not all the symptoms, but some of them. And so, you do often see people going through being, declaring they're intolerant to everything. But then when you look at some other factors in their lifestyle that could be improved, such as, sleep and kind of stress management, those types of things can be really an opportunity to get under control as well. And so you brought up the gut-brain axis there, which is that idea of brain connect to the gut. And I'm sure it's not the first time that our listeners have heard that before. But what's that all about? How do you explain that one?
It's exactly what you just said before, Tom, as well. It's so common that physicians are finding both intestinal issues and mental health disorders coexisting within the same individual. So you're actually starting to see that. And, like if we go old school, when we go mental health, well, more often people, when they go mental health, they think here. But actually, we actually now starting to turn, or there's a lot of theories of that change to starting to look into the gut more than the brain, because of that interconnectivity. And that's what the gut-brain axis is, or the gut-brain connection. And that describes a two-way, or the bidirectional connection and communication between the gut and the brain, which are then again connected through that vagus nerve. And they communicate both ways through this nerve connection. So that's why it's such an important nerve to actually have and to even understand within our body. It's also equally important part of the communication loop between the gut and the brain is our gut microbiome. And that actually refers to trillions of microorganisms that mainly live in the gut, but they also directly communicate up the vagus nerve system into the brain. So it's a very clear pathway, or clear and easy understanding. When you've got a really poor gut microbiome, then you're going to be getting a different communication or a different message then sent to your brain. And so that's where it's starting to understand the connection in many psychiatric conditions, including depression and anxiety. So what they're suggesting is that rather than continually focusing on mental health and looking at the cognitive region, why don't then we look at other dietary issues, or how healthy our gut microbiome is, and what else we can then do to improve that as well. So it's starting to bring, I suppose, more of a holistic approach to mental health, where essentially what we eat and how we are from a micro level is also just as important or you do this in connection with other areas that, with the cognitive areas of mental health strategies too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's quite just how you've explained that. And I guess when I think of always practical examples of this in different, client scenarios that we've had through our centers. And, it's really that common thing where someone's trying to do everything for their gut health, but they're just not addressing any of, the other stuff as well. That's more, I guess, So, and personal story as well from me, which I may have shared or in the past, but in going back about 7 years, we were just going through a really big period of change at Pinnacle Health Group. I think we've doubled in size in about, over a 2 year period. And then I had a break to go to Perth for a holiday. And it was like the first break I'd had in what felt like probably a year, but it was quite intense leading up to that. And basically I was pushing through, and the symptom that got me, or the thing that showed me that I was burnt out, was actually my guts. So my gut health was poor, and then I was out of action for about a week when I was on holiday. But when I thought about it, and everyone's like, "Oh, you need to check all your food tolerances," but really, what was going on was I was just smashing work and not looking after myself properly. So that holistic approach was was part of the solution, but it wasn't drink kombucha and game over. There was a bit more to it. So it's kind of interesting that when you do think of all those, I guess that holistic approach to mental health and supporting ourselves just for optimal performance as well from a mental health perspective. What are some of the key strategies then for people to support their vagus nerve? And I guess when you're doing these strategies, you're probably not thinking, "Oh, I'm really helping my vagus nerve," because maybe this is the first time you've even heard of this nerve.
Yeah, and it's nice because and I think all the listeners out there know that I'm very much the how-to or the why. I never give a suggestion without actually realizing the why. And I'm hoping that some of these suggestions you're like, oh, okay, I already do that. I didn't know that actually might be supporting me. And that's a really good thing, because what we want to do is if we can make sure that this vagus nerve is supported through, just through different strategies, which I'll talk through in a minute, it gives you a little bit more motivation to do it. And again, as I always say, wellness is a discipline. And what we, I suppose, dare I say, the great Australian way of what you've done is that we're like, we'll keep on going, we'll be stoic, we'll go, because we can already see that we're getting a holiday coming up. But more often than not, and especially what we already know the last couple of years, they can sometimes be few and far between. So doing these little strategies, it's going to be able to support you to get to those holidays, and then have a really actually be quite optimized when you are there, rather than, which we see a lot of people go, in the first week I get there, it's like I crash and I need 3 or 4 days to kind of wind down. Whereas wouldn't it be cool to be able to go straight into a holiday and go, actually, I feel the best I possibly feel, and I'm going to hit it hard. That's where we really want to be able to get to. So if we start doing these on a daily basis, which again, some of them are just I already do that, we're going to be able to get there, because a lot of people have got their eye on the prize already for Christmas. So this would be a great thing to start doing until Christmas, to then, rather than looking at the finishing line, trying to tap it, which a lot of us can in December. How about if we go in with a little bit more energy? And some of these top strategies, Really cool. We're all focused on the heart rate and also the oxygen. The first one I love, humming and chanting. It really has a really strong effect on the vagus nerve. So if you combine some humming with some meditative breathing, where taking those slow, deep breaths in through the nose and hum as we slowly breathe out, it actually the vibrations in your ribs and your throat and your mouth and then your cranium actually start to invigorate that nerve. So that's something that's really cool. And again, it's only about 5 or 10 minutes. You might even do this when you're cooking or when you're doing something else, so you can
Yeah.
connect with another area there. And that also then adds on to that slow breathing. Most people take around 10 to 14 breaths per minute. Now, if we can slow that down to around 6 breaths per minute, is really, again, another way to alleviate that stress. And it's kind of like we're trying to divert that oxygen into another area of our body, and really then start to have a better response for the PNS when it's needed to work there. As I did yesterday, and I didn't even know I was doing it, cold water. It in the cases of that high heart rate, it stimulates our vagus nerve to bring the heart rate back down. What they're actually suggesting here is that if you can plunge your face every morning 30 to 60 seconds in ice water, not only actually does it have apparently some really beneficial effects for the skin,
Better than
but
Botox.
better than Botox, Tom, better than it's actually known as the diving reflex. So what it does is the vagus nerve will then order your heart rate to slow down in order to conserve that energy. And the dive reflex was actually noted in cold water diving. And it's a really good vagus nerve stimulation method. So it rapidly chills down that feelings of anxiety and that panic. Yesterday, that's all I was thinking of, was like, how am I going to survive? I could not think of anything else because it was so cold. So that's something you can potentially do. Or what other people like to do is that 30 seconds, have the hot shower in the morning and then flick it to 30 seconds. So it's a little bit like that. Who's that guy that everyone
Wim
talks
Hof.
about?
Yeah.
Wim Hof, yeah.
Yeah.
And that really helps that area. Then you've got exercise. Again, it's about getting the heart rate up and down. And it's also a really good way on how to balance that cortisol level there. So a lot of people have heard about that, and that can be something, just half an hour in the morning can really balance out your day, especially after sleep. So even if you get up and you just exercise before anything else in the day, that can actually start to elevate your heart rate and your oxygen levels from day dot, the first thing you do. And also you feel good because you might have ticked that first thing off your list, can be very helpful there. And mixing the exercise up on a different weekly basis, like strength, walking, high HIIT classes, doesn't always have to be the same thing. That's actually really good as well to make sure you can calibrate that heart rate in different areas. Laughter, what you probably did this morning, and that positive social connections, that actually also increases our heart variability and improves our mood. Laughter, the nerve stimulation often leads to laughter as a side effect. So it suggests that, that's actually connected. The vagus nerve stimulation and laughter is actually connected to one another, which is really good. We talked before about, that the microbiome. So, even trying to incorporate foods with a higher prebiotic and probiotic, or gain a really good supplement, can actually help. And there's actually supplements out there now, or probiotics out there now, that certain strains, don't ask me these strains because I'm not that nutritionist, Tom. It's something that you might want to even go into a health food store and talk about, that certain strains are actually known now to help with the anxious state. And now what we're doing a lot of work around is those psychobiotics. So they're moving away from the antidepressants, which are probably more linked to your mind and to the brain area, to look more in the gut, because, as I said before, the trillions of microbiome, is that there are those trillions of messages, actually more messages in the gut than there are in the brain. So if we can get a healthy gut, they're suggesting you're getting better messages to the brain. And even looking at diet, like a diet can play a major role in this, especially more diets higher in omega-3. So we can look at ways that we can get around this if we are vegetarian or vegan. But if we can have a higher diet, it basically what they're saying is it helps with that electrical flow and that functioning to the brain from the gut. So that's something that can be very important as well. So that's where we really want that higher vagal tone. Vagal tone is associated with that more efficient blood glucose regulation there. So we know that if we're going to be doing stuff for good for our gut, that we want to be able to make sure that we're actually utilizing those things that are, I suppose, dare I say, as you say, the Sesame Street still going on, Tom, those sometimes foods, because the sometimes foods can then take us a little bit of a step backwards, especially if we don't have good gut microbiome in the first place. So it's a very fine balance, but we can do it through exercises, through diets, and through again, cognitive behavior therapy, and getting those the dysfunctional thoughts. I'm not discrediting my work, Tom. Just is that you can add a few more in the mix, and you get a very nice cake batter to make you feel to make it rise and to make you rise.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's great to hear all those, because as you've linked all this together, the physiology, how your brain works, and then the physical aspect as well. What we're sort of starting to see, I guess, from hearing you today, is the very much a holistic approach to mental health. And yes, we learnt about the vagus nerve, but what we really learned about is some strategies as well for I guess just keeping ourselves in check. I love the example of, or maybe I don't love the example I gave, which was me burning out on the way to a holiday. But if you can kind of break that down into 10-week blocks perhaps, and then fitting in those daily rituals, or those blocks where you can kind of make sure you're doing some of these things to support your health and your vagus nerve, as it turns out. Now, thanks so much for today. I appreciate it.
Pleasure, Tom. Have a good day, everyone.
Take care.